Hello everyone, welcome to the Melting Pot podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Monkhouse. The Melting Pot is as a result of my hunger for optimizing business performance, scaling up organizations, corporate culture, customer addiction, building high-performing teams, along with a few other obsessions along the way. I've spent the last several years working for and with some of the most successful, top-performing companies in the world. And this podcast is my attempt to synthesize what I've learned along the way to help you build a high-quality business and live a more fulfilling life. If you enjoy the podcast, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at dominicmonkhouse.com. Hi, today I'm talking to Guy Rigby. Guy Rigby is a partner at Smith and Williamson. They're an accountancy firm who, despite being in the top 10, focus on the entrepreneur, the founder of the business rather than the business. So they see themselves as the lifelong financial partner for the business owner rather than the accountancy firm to do the audit. And Guy's unusual as an accountant. As we find out in the interview, he's an accountant and an entrepreneur, having built and sold a number of businesses, and actually took Smith and Williamson deep into the entrepreneur as a target customer back 10 years ago when he joined them. He's also author of a fantastic book called From Vision to Exit, and we talk a little bit about that and some of his top tips. And very much his work, the book that he created, that he wrote, helps entrepreneurs step through all of the things that they need to do. Obviously from a financial angle, many of those things, but do include, how to recruit a board and how to recruit a business and how to do brand identity and sales and marketing. But there's a lot of other great stuff in there about finance and financial management. So we have a great conversation today, and we get some top tips from Guy as well in terms of books that have made a big difference for him. I had a great time talking to Guy. I hope you enjoy our discussions.
Okay, my name's Guy Rigby. I'm a partner at Smith and Williamson. I started the Entrepreneurial Services group at Smith and Williamson, and I now chair it, having given the day-to-day executive responsibility to a couple of colleagues.
Does Smith and Williamson have a particular niche in the UK market?
Yes, I mean, we're quite a large firm. We're the 8th largest accounting firm in the UK, but we're also pretty unique in that we're a private client business. So we talk about acting for private clients and their business interests. And our primary focus on private clients is on entrepreneurs, founders of businesses, who we literally try to take from vision to exit and then beyond. We have a lot of insightful startups that come to us. We work with a lot of growth companies, often called scale-ups, obviously, these days. And we'll take them all the way through to an exit or a float, if that's what the founders want to do with the businesses. And then we have a proper private client finance business behind that. So we manage around 20-odd billion pounds of assets on behalf of our private clients, something that no other firm of accountants does. So it's a pretty unique offering.
I was going to say, that sounds very unique that you describe your offering as client focused rather than business focused. That's the sort of the unique element of it, that you're about the founders and not the company?
Well, we're about both, but our route in typically is through the founder. A lot of firms of accountants, the relationship is between, if you like, the auditor and the finance director. At Smith and Williamson, the relationship is between the partner and the owner. And we find that gives us a much better insight into where we're trying to help the owner get to. And we can then tailor the things that we do to the owner's wishes rather than the management team. Most owners get it. And once they join us, they love it. Some don't get it. They say, my accounts, my whole financial stuff, my FD deals with that. I'm not really interested. But most owners get it and find benefit from it.
Well, and also it means that I do see sometimes in organizations, in other accountancy firms, a tension between the M&A team and the audit team, because the audit partners seem to want to hang on to their client and the M&A guys want to roll them up and sell them to somebody. And in your case, that doesn't matter because your relationship is with the founder and not.
Yeah, we're looking for a lifetime relationship, really. Yeah. With founders, and founders do lots of things. Some have one go at building a business successfully. Some actually have multiple goes. But typically what happens on that journey is that their situation changes, they have families, they accumulate elements of wealth, along the way. And we try to provide literally every financial service on that journey. And so I'm probably not wrong in saying that we have something like 85 members of the same family as clients going back, to the late 1800s. It's pretty amazing.
And how old's the firm then?
1881.
Right.
It was founded in Glasgow by Messrs. Smith and Williamson.
Okay. You said you founded the Entrepreneurs?
The Entrepreneurs Division. So I joined in 2008 to start the Entrepreneurs Division. It was something that Smith and Williamson had been trying to focus on. Smith and Williamson had a lot of private clients, as you can imagine, high net worth, probably, although they had some what I would call new age entrepreneurs, they also had a lot of old age entrepreneurs in terms of farmers, landed estates, all that sort of thing. And they realized, I think, that they were probably missing a trick in not actually bringing some focus to the entrepreneurial services area. My career to date suited that, and I joined up in February 2008 and started that group.
What difference has that made to the firm then?
It's made a big difference in terms of, I think it's helped to modernize the firm, because a lot of people would have looked at Smith and Williamson and said it was fairly traditional. That's no bad thing, by the way, but old-fashioned could be another word, which doesn't ring as well. So we brought new ideas, we brought a new way of doing things. We've now adopted something that we call One Smith and Williamson. In the past, we had very much an accountancy business on one side and a wealth management business on the other. Now we're very much one firm, because the journey of the entrepreneur, of course, is a lifetime journey, going through those wealth creative moments and then having to look after the money, as it were. So I think we've modernized the firm. We've given it a fresh look externally. Some of what we talk about has become standard language in the firm. And we've won an enormous number of good new clients as well.
Do you have an ideal customer?
An ideal customer is one that is on a journey. If you are in the middle of the sticks and you have a small corner shop business, and that's how you're very happy and you want to carry on doing that, and that's a great business, that's a lifestyle choice, then I'm not sure we can add value to that. You may as well use your local practitioner or whatever it may be. But if you've actually got a vision and a strategy and you're trying to get somewhere, then our whole service is about trying to help you achieve that goal. We do that not only by providing every financial service you might need, I guess, but also trying to provide connectivity to people that can help you get there. So we have lots of relationships with other entrepreneurs, obviously, that we can introduce. We have what we call strategic alliance partners and programs. So if we don't know the answer to something, we probably know a man who can. So these effectively widen our network and enable us to provide a much deeper and broader service than most other firms. Let's face it, most accountants do accounts. That's what they're there for. They do the accounts, they do the tax return. We're trying to help entrepreneurs actually succeed and achieve their goals over time. And we kind of facilitate that through lots of events, lots of networking, lots of introductions, and a pretty close relationship with the entrepreneurs that we deal with, as opposed to the finance directors, as I mentioned earlier.
You wrote a book about the whole thing.
I did. Yes, unfortunately, I've been going rather a long time. I started training as an accountant, probably mistakenly, in 1971.
Slates, abacus?
It was unbelievable. Well, pounds, shillings and pence.
Yeah.
Was one of the things. I had the good fortune to work in a company called Chrysalis, which was a music business, and they had some great bands in those days, Jethro Tull, Procol Harum, you remember all those. I looked after what is now the equivalent of the O2. It's called the Rainbow Theatre, and I did all the accounting for the Rainbow Theatre and managed to get to see all the bands. So it kept my interest in accountancy going. And the moment I qualified, I left the profession and went and became a finance director, which is it's quite a regular step. But what's unusual is that I came back into the profession. So I left in 76 when I qualified, and I came back in 79, joined a tiny little firm, which I ended up building and growing myself. And from then on, really, I've been in what I call SME space. The big four, deal with the world's largest companies. I've been growing up with all these guys trying to build businesses. And I ended up really providing the service that Smith and Williamson provides now, apart from the wealth management side then. And I was very much the mentor advisor to the entrepreneur. Built up my firm, sold it in the 90s, then became an investor and a director in a bunch of SME type companies, some of which were successful, some of which weren't so successful. And I've just hung around that whole environment in my life. So in 2008, I wrote a list of 100 things successful entrepreneurs should look to achieve in building a successful business, or the 100 things they should do to build a successful business. And I went and presented it at some hotel near Tower Hill. And someone I knew in the audience came up to me afterwards, and he'd just written a book. His name was Neil Gandhi. That was really good. He said, "You should write a book. It's easy." And that set me off on a sort of 2-year journey of writing a book, which is called From Vision to Exit, and which has done quite well. So I was delighted with it. And it's sort of my life experiences translated on the page, I suppose.
And so was Neil right? Was it easy?
Not easy. Not easy. I tell you, it's not difficult writing a book, but it takes an awful lot of time. I mean, I can't tell you, I just have no idea how many hours, probably 1,000 or 1,500 hours writing this book. And at the time, I was working full time at Smith and Williamson. So I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week, do 3 hours on the book, and then go to work. And then at weekends, I'd work until lunchtime on a Saturday or Sunday. And I ended up writing an enormous quantity of words. You wouldn't believe it. And before I really thought, well, then someone then talked to me about getting it published. And it was an interesting journey. It's now a 95,000 word tome. It was about 150,000 at one point.
And so it's the 100 things. I
guess the 100 things are probably weaved in there somewhere. There's probably a lot more than 100 things in here.
And so what are the highlights? What advice are you giving entrepreneurs that you'd experienced yourself? Because you say it's rare to go out of the industry, but not only that, you then built a business and sold it. And so, you're an unusual accountant in both those regards, because most accountants are partners in a firm. They're not entrepreneurs in the same sense that, they haven't sold a business, built it and sold it, which, puts you in a different group.
Yes. Well, I mean, I sold my accountancy firm, then I joined another one, which I became senior partner of and merged up with another firm. Then I joined a third. So it sounds like I've moved around a lot, but the first two were actually joined at the hip. The third we sold in 2008. So I've had a couple of exits there, but I've also been looking at entrepreneurs exiting, founders that I've acted for exiting their business as well. The idea behind the book is that it's 19 chapters long. It's got 18 chapters on how to build a business, one on how to sell it. You can dip in and out of the book. So there's bits about vision and strategy. There's stuff about recruiting the right people, retaining people. The stuff on business planning, as you'd expect from an accountant, the stuff on financial planning or financial management rather than financial planning, actually, from an accounting perspective, and then various other bits, international business, doing business, buy and build strategies for growing businesses, that sort of stuff.
Of the 19, are there some that are more important to others?
I think a lot of people get fixated on a not very successful or potentially successful idea. Right. And they spend their lives pushing water uphill. And that doesn't mean they can't make a living, but actually they start off being very passionate about what they're doing. And within 2 or 3 years, they find that actually it's not quite as exciting as they thought it was, because it's not going as well as they thought it might. But then they just kind of carry on turning the same handle and paying some staff, which is great, and collecting some tax for the government and eking out a lifestyle for themselves. It's sometimes difficult to get them to understand that they need to change something major in order to move things forward. And sometimes it's impossible to move things forward in their own environments. Some people don't want to take the risk. Some people don't have the ability. Those who do, who have a great idea, and I always encourage to Dream Bigger, which is a report we just launched at Smith and Williamson, actually called Dream Bigger. So
Okay, well, and what's that about?
we interviewed, or we did a survey of 1,000 different businesses. 500 of them were what you would term as a scale-up, and 500 of them were what you call ordinary businesses. And we kind of examined the attitudes of the entrepreneurs behind the companies. And if you really summarize the report in like one sentence, what it tells you is that those who think they can. And that's what it's about. It's actually having that confidence to pursue your vision, your dream, your strategy, and actually go after it. And a lot of people just don't have that desire, urge, ambition, whatever it may be, even though they've got fairly successful businesses. They may be risk averse. There may be all sorts of reasons why they can't do it. Maybe that particular stage of their life or family situations or whatever. But dream bigger. What we're saying to people is, look, if you've got a great idea or a great business which is capable of being expanded, why wouldn't you? Yeah, you'll do yourself a favor, you would hope. Obviously, you'll create wealth, you'll create jobs, you'll benefit the country. To a certain extent, you become a bit of a celebrity as an entrepreneur these days. Our successful entrepreneurs are more like pop stars these days, aren't they? People write about them. Again, we've just launched at Smith and Williamson something called the Hall of Fame, and we're profiling successful entrepreneurs. You know, people love it.
Well, and you create a lot of great content to sort of support the community.
We try.
In the Dream Bigger thing, did you identify any things that people who maybe are stuck could do to sort of trigger their...
When you look back at my 100 things that help people grow businesses faster, they're well spread. I think finance, which of course is a specialist subject for us, is a key issue, is a key area. People either don't know how to go and get finance or don't want to go and get finance, bury their head in the sand about what it can do for them. And that can be a challenge. The other thing that people struggle with is building teams. And I think we all know how difficult that can be, because even in my career, I've picked some bad ones, as it were, and they can seriously put you off course for a while if you get the wrong people in the team. So it's probably people and finance that are the biggest things. Some businesses, however, just don't have the capability. They don't either have the business model suited to growth. They can't get sufficient demand for the product or service. It's amazing how many businesses develop to a particular stage and then seem to get stuck. You have to question why that is. Why can't you become a much bigger business? If you've managed to get to 3 or 4 million of turnover, why can't you be a 20 million pound business? It's an interesting question that so many people get to a certain stage and then sort of get stuck.
Do you think the people who are stuck are frustrated that they're stuck? I mean, is that the sense when if you meet these guys? Do they feel they've got an intractable problem, or do they not want to solve it? Are they just happy? Does it become a lifestyle business?
I think to a certain extent, these businesses do then become lifestyle businesses. There's no doubt that once you've built a business that sustains you and your family and your basic needs and your holidays and the sort of car you want to drive and blah, 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 which in itself means you've got a relatively successful business, means that actually, why do you want to take the risk, or why do you want to work any harder, or why bother? And it's not everyone who wants a 20 million pound exit or a 100 million pound exit. Some people just love their businesses. I've got a guy at the moment, actually, that I mentor, and his aim in life is just to build this wonderful business. He never wants to sell it or anything. He just wants to be involved and have fun, you know.
I meet a lot of entrepreneurs, and often when people become clients, one of the things I do with them is I get everybody around the room to do a life plan. So that not just the owner, but the sort of the leadership team, now we have a series of life plans, and how does the business help them all achieve, steps on their life plan over the next 3 to 5 years or whatever it might be that they're working together. And quite often I ask people, what 10 years after you're dead, what do you want people to still be saying about you? Have you left a legacy? And some people say, I don't care. But often people go, hadn't thought about that. Now you've made me think about that. I sort of do want to at least people to have realised I've been on the planet for some period of time, and then start thinking about how could they take that 3 million, 4 million pound business and what could they do with it? Because they're not going to sell it, because without them, it probably has limited value. But what could they do to leave a legacy?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? A lot of people turn to some sort of charitable activity and get involved in that, which is great. Legacy is difficult because memories are short. I think one lives on perhaps in the minds of one's family, which is important. And to look back and think that, you've left them some sort of legacy. I've been having fun over the last 2 or 3 years because both my children are entrepreneurs. 2 of my 3 are entrepreneurs. My 3rd daughter actually has Down syndrome, so that's a very different situation, and she's as happy as Larry. But my 2 older ones, my son started a company in December 2016, funnily enough, with the chap who asked me about the book and why didn't I write a book, a chap called Neil Gandhi, and floated it in December 2018 on the London Stock Exchange. And my daughter has started a company called Mush, which is effectively a site for young mums where they can meet each other and learn all sorts of stuff. And she's raised venture capital for that. So it's been an interesting journey. I am the bookkeeper for that, by the way.
You talked briefly about putting together the right teams and hiring people. You must have your sort of Guy Rigby top tips for...
Well, my Guy Rigby top tip is probably not to run out of money. So one of the most important people that you get on board early is someone who understands finance, because entrepreneurs are not very good at finance, particularly in the early stages. I think life's changed a bit now because, a lot of these young entrepreneurs are able to raise quite significant sums of money, whether it's through friends and family using things like the Enterprise Investment Scheme, the EIS as it's known, or even SEIS, or going to venture capital. But people don't realize that if you take a big order, it could bankrupt you. It's known as overtrading, as you know. So getting someone who can control the numbers is important. They don't have to be full-time in the business, but they need to be alongside you somewhere. My first recruit is someone who can make sure you don't run out of money. And the second one is always a non-exec director for me. And that might not be a formal non-exec, it might be a mentor. But typically one who is operating in an area that you need help in. So if you're trying to, develop your international sales program, then maybe it's someone who's been in international selling or whatever it may be. But if you're a highly regulated business, it might be someone who's understood a lot about regulatory compliance and the FCA or whatever it may be. So I do think those are important. And then you kind of, as you grow, you add to that, build that team. The entrepreneur to start with, of course, does everything.
Yes. I think it's interesting that you say get in a non-exec, because quite often, well, certainly in my own experience and lots of other people I talk to, there can often be a sense of loneliness at the top. Your wife is only so interested for so long, for not very long often. But having somebody that you can, use as a sounding board who's not in the business every day, because you're building a team, and certainly early on, there's that gap in, that the owner-founder is often a significantly more capable individual than the other people who are doing the things around them. And just having that sort of sounding board. I meet people all the time who haven't done that, and I think wish they had.
Yeah, and I think, if you're starting in business now, pretty important to have a co-founder. They might not be an equal co-founder, but to be taken seriously by the outside world, investors, etc., it kind of needs to be more than one of you and a few people you pay, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There needs to be a bit more of a team in there, and I think it can help enormously to find a co-founder. I think that, the typical tech business now will have a founder with a great idea and a tech co-founder. And that's a good model, actually. But you have to start slowly and build your team and keep them enthused.
And do you have any recruitment top tips?
It's a character read more than anything, isn't it? You recruit for whatever the word is, recruit for character and train for skills. Is that right? I mean, unless there's an absolute requirement for a particular skill. So it's no use recruiting a non-tech person to do a tech role. But I think the types of individuals you work with, you've got to like them. and be able to get on with them and trust them and feel that they've got the same interests, at least from a business perspective, as you have. You might not support the same football team, but nevertheless, you have common vision and goals and all the rest of it. And I think that you need to then make sure that they're properly on board. So the concept of sharing ownership in a business, not equally, but shared ownership creates a lot of stickiness, I think.
Okay. That must be something the firm advises on, I guess. So you get involved in helping clients do that all the time.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you the sort of standard questions now. The first one that I ask everybody is, knowing what you know now, and this is not going backward, this is not a sort of sense of regret thing, it's at the point where you are in your life, you now have skills and knowledge that you didn't have. Where in your career, if you went back, would some of that have had the biggest impact? What would you have done differently, or what could you now do differently if you went back in a time machine?
The most interesting period in my life, probably, the two most interesting periods, one was running my own business, which I built from about 7 to about 50 people, which is not a big business, but nevertheless, it came with its challenges. And the second most interesting is starting this, being an entrepreneur at Smith and Williamson, effectively starting a new business within a business. In both cases, I wish I'd gone faster. I wish I'd been able to accelerate the process. Everything seems to take so long, right? And I think it's a massive business lesson when you're doing a business plan. A lot of people, give you the nice little hockey stick forecast of how you're going to spend $1 million this year and next year there's going to be 20 million in the bank. Doesn't happen like that, right? It takes much, much longer to do stuff than you think. And it takes many more resources. And I think those constraints, time and resources, are the two things that stop people building big businesses more quickly.
And in your own situations there, what could you have done differently to have gone faster?
I could have taken on more partners earlier, and I could have recognized in my own firm that we were effectively the entrepreneur's advisor. Not that the word entrepreneur in the 80s and 90s was really used very much, but nevertheless, I could have recognized that we were doing something differently, because all I've done really at Smith and Williamson is apply all the old logic that I had back then and that's why people used to use us.
So if I can paraphrase you, one is you picked a niche, a vertical market. You had a concentration around a particular customer type that had a particular problem, entrepreneurs, and then for you, partner is really sales and revenue.
It's sales and it's looking after. I mean, we talk about finders, minders, and grinders, or at least I do. It's probably not a common term anymore, but you would typically put a partner in the finder-minder category, if that makes sense.
Yes, but
so a partner would be that big character, or have a character, go out, work, attract entrepreneurs, and then make sure that they were properly looked after. So a bit of minding, and then hopefully your team would do some more minding and a bit of grinding when the accounts needed doing and the tax return needed filing and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. More
of those.
Yeah,
more of those. And I did it in my own way. In my first business, what I used to do was fill up. I used to take on a new manager, and then hopefully within 2 years they'd become a partner, and then they would get a client allocation because we were winning lots of business. So we would give them a client allocation and slowly, but instead of going one at a time and every couple of years, maybe it should have been 2 or 3 at a time, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
But there are constraints. I remember looking at my bank statement once in about 1990 and seeing that I was £1 million overdrawn. It was a bit of a worry. I was a sole practitioner at the time. I had plenty of cover in terms of what we call work in progress and debtors and all that sort of thing. But nevertheless, and I think even then, I was responsible for, 100,000 a month of overheads or something that had to be, most of which were salaries. You're running quite hard. And the question is really, how much extra risk do you want to take on? I think it's a challenge. Challenge for me, just as it is for an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think going back to your point about having a partner or a co-founder, I think that helps with the risk, doesn't it? Often, not because it's necessarily shared, but you've got somebody else to talk to and collaborate with. And
you do need people to talk to. I think it's really, really important. And the more you talk to people, the more ideas you'll have about how you should be running your business. There is a tendency to look inward and therefore do what you think's right. And then, you can do that for a couple of years and realize you've missed a boat or two because, you just weren't looking around.
Yeah. The other question I've got for you, so other than From Vision to Exit, what other books have you read that have had maybe 1, 2 or 3 that have had a significant impact on you?
Well, one of my clients who I love dearly is a guy called Daniel Priestley. I don't know whether you know Daniel.
Yeah, I do know Daniel, yes.
And he's written a series of books. I can't remember what they're all called. One of them is The Entrepreneur Revolution. Another one is...
Key Person of Influence.
Key Person of Influence, KPI, absolutely, which is, of course, a different way of looking at KPI. I think he writes some really good stuff, actually, which I've enjoyed reading over the years.
24 Assets is his latest book, I think, and that's...
He's written 24 Assets, which I have to admit to not having read. Okay. This one by Reid Hoffman is worth a read. It's called Blitz Scaling.
Yeah.
It's about how to move fast, really, and, what you do. The secret is blitz scaling, a set of techniques for scaling up at a dizzying pace. I like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. But you've got to have the resources, and the primary resource you need to move at a dizzying pace is finance.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to run out.
Growth sucks cash.
Yeah. You can't recruit people without cash. You can recruit people on lower salaries if you give them shares and share options and things like that. But you still need enough cash. And what we've seen in Silicon Valley over the last 30 years or so is that cash starting to become available. And we're kind of playing catch up over here. But nevertheless, we've got a long way to go to get the right amount of cash into the hands of the right entrepreneurs and get better at choosing the right entrepreneurs as well, I think.
Guy, that's fantastic. So we've got your book, we've got some Daniel Priestley stuff, and we've got Reid Hoffman's Blitz Scaling. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
How do people get a hold of you if they want to reach you?
My email address, perhaps, okay. Guy.Rigby.
We'll put that in the show notes. That's fantastic.
My mobile number, my whatever.
We'll share that with you, and we'll get you to sign off on that. We'll put that in the show notes. That'd be brilliant.
Good. Thank you. I hope it's all right.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Good. And we must get back to that skiing sometime.
Indeed. Thanks very much.
All right.
All this information and more can be found at dominicmonkhouse.com/podcast. There you'll find show notes, additional reading and links related to this episode. You can also find my blog and the past editions of the Melting Pot newsletter. The simplest thing to do is to sign up to my subjectively not crap once a week newsletter, where I'll update you on what I've been up to, the most interesting articles I've read, and all things relating to scaling up, high-performing teams, net promoter score, company culture, etc. Social, you can find me on Twitter at Dom Monkhouse and LinkedIn at Dominic Monkhouse. LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach me and share your questions and comments. Thanks for listening.